Story 1. Ouija board at an abandoned church. In New Jersey during our teenage years, James, Sean, and I were known for our thrill-seeking, boundary-pushing ways. One October night, inspired by the eerie atmosphere of the holiday season, we decided to explore an old abandoned church on a hill that we had long been fascinated with. The church, steeped in local legend and decay, seemed like the perfect setting for our Ouija session. The journey to the church was filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The road leading to the church was blocked, so we parked on the side of the road and walked up the hill with a single flashlight, trying to avoid attracting attention. The church came into view, surrounded by dense woods. The gravel parking lot was littered with debris, and the building itself looked like a relic from a forgotten era. We tried to open the large front door, which scraped loudly against the floor. Inside, the church was exactly as we expected, an abandoned building filled with broken windows, graffiti, and the remnants of what once was. Ouija board in the center of the room and arranged 3 candles in a triangle around it. The flickering light cast long, eerie shadows on the walls, amplifying the already unsettling atmosphere of the church. With the candle providing the only source of light, we began the shots. Sean, who had brought the Ouija board, took the lead, asking the usual question. "Is anyone there? And what do you want?" The Ouija board began to move, and while we initially laughed it off as someone's prank, the mood changed when we heard a loud, ominous crack coming from the direction of the altar. We jumped up at once, shining our flashlights toward the altar, but saw nothing unusual. The noise frightened us, and as we continued our questioning, the tension grew. Another sound from the altar area broke the silence. This time, a small rock, about the size of a golf ball, fell onto the Ouija board with a terrifying thud. The sudden, unexplained appearance of the rock was too much to bear. The 3 of us screamed in horror, and we abandoned the board and candles and ran out of the church. The way back was a blur of fear and confusion. Sean, who was particularly superstitious, insisted that we had encountered a spirit, while I believed that someone else was in the church with us. The next day, Sean and James returned to retrieve the Ouija board, but found it missing. The candles remained undisturbed. The experience haunted us, leaving a lasting impression of fear and unease. Story 2. A visit to a suspicious church. Marissa and I were on a quest to find the perfect small-town atmosphere in rural Warren County, Georgia. After a long day of exploring the area, we decided to visit a small, quaint church that we had noticed earlier. The church's steeple rose above the treetops, a beacon of serenity in an otherwise quiet landscape. As Roman Catholics, we were curious about local places of worship and hoped to experience a little local flavor. When we arrived at the church, we saw an old gravel parking lot littered with old cars, mostly pickup trucks and station wagons. The sight of so many vehicles suggested that a service might be taking place. We parked next to an old rusted pickup truck and walked up the uneven steps, our footsteps echoing in the still air. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, we were greeted with an unusual sight. The interior of the church was dimly lit by a few flickering bulbs hanging from the ceiling, casting an eerie glow over the wooden pews. The congregation, composed of people in their 30s and 40s, sat silently, their faces unreadable. There was no visible religious symbolism, no altar decorated with crosses, just a barren, unsettling space. As we quietly took our seats, the man leading the service approached us. He was tall, with a stern face, dressed in a suit that seemed out of place in the dilapidated setting. His dark, intense eyes locked on us with an uneasy gaze. He asked who we were and why we were here. The hostility in his voice was clear, and the congregation's gaze followed us with terrifying precision. A chill of unease spread through us as the man continued to examine us. He spoke in a low, curt voice, demanding to know if we were lost or if we were here for something else. His demeanor was intimidating, and the cold stares of the congregation gave us goosebumps. Realizing that we were not welcome, we decided to leave. As we walked back to the parking lot, the gray pickup truck we had seen earlier began following us at a distance. The truck kept close, but never came too close, its presence adding to our growing sense of dread. In a panic, we drove straight to the nearest sheriff's office, the pickup truck following us the entire way. It only turned away when we reached the safety of the police station. The encounter left us shaken, and the sheriff, after hearing our story, confirmed that there had been reports of a local cult operating under the guise of a church. The unsettling visit to the church and the strange presence of the truck left us deeply unsettled, and we avoided that area in the future, forever haunted by that dark encounter. Story 3. An unsettling encounter at church. As a young Cub Scout, I was accustomed to attending assemblies at a Catholic elementary school that also held our Sunday Mass. It was during one of these Sunday services that I first noticed him. A man with glasses and a white mustache. His gaze was intense, and despite the solemnity of the service, he kept turning his head to look at me. His stare and sometimes strange, exaggerated expressions made me feel uncomfortable. My mother, noticing my discomfort, reassured me with a pat and warned me to ignore him. Her own discomfort was evident as she looked at him with disapproval. Although she felt better, my discomfort remained, and the man's presence seemed increasingly unsettling. A few days later, at a Cub Scout meeting, we went on a scavenger hunt in the school gym and surrounding rooms. During my search, I ventured into a narrow hallway that led to the back of the cafeteria. There, near an old ice cream cooler, I came face to face with the same man from Sunday. His unkempt appearance and distasteful smile sent a chill down my spine. He approached me with an unnerving eagerness, holding out his hand and making the odd offer to take me to a place with better food. He gripped my wrist and refused to budge as he tried to coax me away. A panic surged through me, and I tried to pull away, but he held on tighter. He whispered urgently and menacingly, "Come on, it's going to be fun." My heart raced, and I screamed for help. He loosened his grip, and he quickly retreated, disappearing down the hall. Panicked, I ran back to the gym, panting and shaking, and reported the incident to our Cub Scout leader. The leader, a kind father, immediately alerted my mother. The disturbing truth soon came to light. The man was an employee of the church living on the premises. There were reports of his inappropriate behavior toward an altar boy, confirming the church acted quickly, cutting ties with him and tightening security. Even so, the memory of that encounter left an indelible mark of fear and suspicion, casting a shadow over what should have been a harmless and enjoyable activity. Story 4. Lost in the woods and a creepy church encounter. The summer of their senior year had arrived, and with it came a sense of freedom and adventure. Jason, Brian, and I decided to have one last fun time before we went our separate ways. Jason had just moved to Lexington, South Carolina, and his family had kindly invited us to visit for the weekend. The idea of exploring our new surroundings appealed to us, so we agreed to take the trip. One day, While Jason's parents were busy with their new home, Brian and I ventured out to explore the nearby woods. We followed a winding river that cut through the lush landscape, its gentle currents and chirping birds creating the illusion of tranquility. The serenity of the scene was deceptive. We soon realized we were lost. The river seemed to stretch on forever in both directions, and the surrounding woods grew denser and more foreboding. With no clear sense of direction and no obvious signs of civilization, our anxiety grew. The sun was slowly dropping in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward us like clenched fingers. In desperation, we continued to follow the river, hoping it would lead us to safety. Just then, we came across an old church, almost hidden by dense trees and encroaching foliage. The church was a dilapidated red brick structure, with a dirt parking lot and a few old, rusted cars, mostly white and from the 70s or 80s, lined up like silent sentinels. We approached cautiously, hoping to find someone who could help us contact Jason's family. The air was thick with the smell of decay and the distant sound of gospel music. As we pushed open the heavy wooden door, we were greeted by a scene that seemed to belong to another era. The interior was dark and musty, the pews old and cracked. A few dozen people sat silently, their clothes worn but clean. An elderly woman with silver hair and horn-rimmed glasses was playing an antique piano. Her music was sweet but eerie in the silence of the church. As we entered, the woman's fingers trembled and the congregation's attention turned to us. Their expressions were unsettling, empty, and unwelcoming. It was as if their gazes pierced through us, stripping away any pretense of normalcy. The entire congregation, dressed in drab clothes, slowly turned their heads at once, their soulless gazes fixed on us. A shiver ran down my spine as Jason, trying to stay calm, apologized for the intrusion and asked to use their phone. The silence was deafening, broken only by the creaking of wooden chairs as people shifted their weight. We slowly backed out, a growing sense of dread pulling us back. Outside, we saw that the people who had followed us all the way to the door were now standing in the yard, their eyes fixed on us with a terrifying intensity. Panic set in as we ran down the dirt road. The woods seemed to close in on us, and every rustle of leaves felt like a threat. We ran for what seemed like hours until we stumbled upon a dilapidated gas station. The old gas station attendant, looking tired and greasy, gave us directions to the nearest highway. His grin was unnerving, making us even more nervous. As we followed his directions, the truck we had seen earlier began to follow us. My heart pounded as we drove straight toward the highway, our pursuer keeping a safe but close distance. When we reached the police station, the officer who had helped us shared a chilling warning about the area's history of cult activity. The encounter at the church became a haunting memory, one that remained in our minds long after the summer ended.